Websites are critically important to the success of any healthcare organization. A website is just as important as your physical space is or used to be 30, 40 years ago. Imagine that you are walking into a physical building and the paint is peeling and the furniture is old. What do you think of that organization or that place? You assume that it's a low quality provider. They don't have the money to take care of their place, so they can't be very successful. Or maybe they just don't care about the appearance. And if they care so little about how their front office lobby works, how much are they going to care about quality care that they're providing you? It gives a really, really bad impression, and patients and families make immediate judgments based upon that. Nowadays, a website is often the first impression that patients have, that insurance payers have when they're checking out your services, when they're looking at contracting with you. I have a pretty good relationship with some high-level individuals at some of the larger payers, and they tell me very directly that when they are looking at contracting with a new provider, they will check out the website. What does it look like? What are the services? How do they feel about the quality? That has a direct impact on the contract negotiations that they will have with that individual provider. So really, really important to get your website right. And it's not just about how it looks. So most of the time, if a team of executives is going to build a new website, they will look at agencies, they will look at other websites that they've designed, and they'll say, okay, this one looks good. I want that agency, or I want the agency to build us a website that has similarities to that one. I like the way that this looks. Now, design is really important, but it doesn't matter if the design is pretty if it's not ranking on Google, if we don't have a good search engine optimized foundation. It doesn't matter if it doesn't convert. Maybe it looks pretty, but our patients don't think so. The way a web design firm looks at a website, the way that maybe we as executives look as a website, doesn't necessarily match what's important to our patients or what looks good to our patients. So we have to have some kind of data analysis. We have to have some kind of user testing to get a strong sense of what's going to be important to the patients and the users of the website, not just our own opinions, in order to make sure that it's converting well. Also, we have to look at the code. Is the code clean? Is it cluttered? Is it a lot of custom code that can be complicated for people if they want to make changes? So there's a lot of stuff that goes into designing a website above and beyond just how it looks. And so in this training, I'm going to walk through how you need to think about website design and what's really important in terms of success. Because if we don't take all these factors into consideration, we can really negatively impact the business. I just saw this last week. We took on a new client. They had a website that was designed by a firm, and the firm's design was great. It was a beautiful website. The code was really solid, but they didn't understand search engine optimization at all. And so half the website wasn't even being indexed by Google because they had the wrong back-end technical specifications. I couldn't even tell you what they are, right? I'm not an SEO specialist, but my team looked at the website, and within 30 minutes, they had identified major issues that were preventing half the website from ranking on Google. This stuff happens pretty consistently when we're taking on SEO projects from design-oriented firms. And in that situation, did the design firm do anything wrong? Not really. They're not SEO specialists. I would say that this was actually an error of the executive team that hired that design firm because they didn't know how to vet the agency for some of these other characteristics and these skills that are really important to a good website build. So what should you look for in really good website design? Obviously, the design part is important. Is it clean? Is it easy to navigate? Is it visually appealing? There's even a psychology component, like really good designers will help you understand that, let's say we've got an individual in an image and they're looking down, and if you follow their gaze, it goes right to a CTA. It goes right to a call to action. We've tested that stuff extensively, and it actually has a significant impact on the conversion rates of the website when you've got visual elements that kind of drive a person both consciously and unconsciously to look at different parts of the site. So design element is obviously really important. We want it to look nice. Understanding the coding aspect, as executives, we're not going to understand how to code. That's not part of our skill set for 99% of us. But we should be asking questions about it, and I'll talk through some of the questions to be asking. But we want to make sure that the code is clean. We want to make sure that they hopefully have good notes in there. So if they did something interesting, especially from a custom code standpoint, that another developer who didn't build the site can follow it and figure it out. Custom code in particular can be a complication. Oftentimes, if it's custom coded, they're doing it for specific reasons. They're trying to add functionality, or they're trying to do something really creative from a design standpoint that you can't do with standard web building tools. So that can be really good, but it can also make it a problem because custom code might connect to a lot of different elements. So custom code might connect to a lot of different elements. So maybe it connects to a global element like a widget or the header or the footer. So if you make an adjustment to the code here, it could break the site in other places. And it's not always easy for an outside developer to see that. So for that reason, custom code is a question mark. I generally recommend not using a lot of custom code. I generally recommend having your developers or your agency try to do as little customized code as possible. If you've got an element, like a design element that say, hey, okay, we can't make this curve without some custom code in there, then maybe look at a different design element just because it adds complexity. If you wanted to make a simple change, like switch out an image or edit some text, you might not be able to do it if custom code is in place. So there's just some different considerations to think about or ask questions about from a coding standpoint. The agency that builds the website has to understand conversions. Even if it looks pretty, that doesn't mean that you have optimized that site for conversions. I can't tell you how often I will look at a site for a new client and they don't have a frozen header, they don't have click to call buttons for call phone numbers, they don't have CTAs that pop out. Like a really common mistake that we see all the time is both executives will do this and creative design agencies. They will have a call to action button that is a brand color of the organization. And what happens when it's a brand color? It fades into the background. It just becomes part of the scenery of the website. So you don't pay attention to it. That is not what you want for a call to action button. You want a call to action button to pop out and to really kind of be screaming at the user visually, like, hey, look at me, click me, and you will increase your conversion rates that way. So it's another example of where design can lead you astray if you're just trying to look at something that maybe looks really appealing to the eye. We don't want everything to be necessarily appealing. We want sometimes it to grab attention and pull us in. So we have to think about that as a conversion element to our design. The search engine optimization component is critical. The vast majority of website design agencies are not SEO specialists. And this is a big problem. So there are two ways to address this. You either find an agency and make sure you're asking questions around SEO to ensure that they have capabilities in that area, or you have an internal SEO team or a contracted SEO team that is going to go over the website and help with the migration of the new build to ensure that none of the SEO elements are damaged or broken or not put into place. We regularly have clients where they hire some outside agency, makes a really pretty website, and then suddenly they install that new website and their traffic and their inquiries just fall off a cliff. Why does that happen? Because they changed up the URL architecture in the way they shouldn't have. They didn't do redirects appropriately. They didn't put their robot.txt file in the way that they should have. And all of these things can have massive impact on your SEO. And the design agency, the development agency might not even understand that. So either make sure that they do, or make sure that you've got a good internal team or external agency partner that is going to follow up to make sure all those elements are in place. Data analysis pre-build is really important. This can add significantly to cost, but if you really want a good website, you should understand what your user behavior is, what their journey and pathways are through the website currently, what information that they're clicking on, how far down the screen that they're scrolling. This gives you data on how the website should be rebuilt. Again, it doesn't really matter if it looks pretty if 90% of the users are leaving after a 10% scroll. They're not even seeing the content on the pages because it hasn't been designed towards their needs. So what we'll do when we're doing a really good web build and we've got the budget for it from the client is we will spend at least a month collecting data on user pathway journeys, on user habits for their design on the website. What buttons are they clicking on? How are they using the menu structure? Are they engaging with widgets, yes or no? When they land on certain kinds of content, where are they trying to go next? Where are they not going next? So for example, if someone comes to an informational page that is not related to a direct service, maybe it's a blog article, they're not going to access a call now button on those pages. They're going to ignore that because they're not there for call now. So on a page that's just informational, we would add a call to action button that has deeper information on that subject. So let's say it's a dental website and we have patients looking at the different material they can use for dental implants. Well, then logically, the next information that you might want to follow up on is the pricing structure for that. So we wouldn't have a CTA to say, hey, call us now for a dental implant. We would say, hey, why don't you check out the pricing for the different materials that you can use for your implants? Okay, now you've got information on the implant, you've got pricing on the implant. Now I might push you to the service page about how we do our implants better than all the competitors in our marketplace. There you're going to have a CTA for call now. So that pre-analysis gives you the data of what people are looking for on what pages, how far they're scrolling down, what they're clicking on or not clicking on, what the menu structure should look like, and that will inform the web build. You should also do that post-web build. So once you have the website built, you're making a bunch of assumptions, and they're good assumptions because they're built on data. But as we know, data doesn't always tell us exactly what we need to know. It is just part of the story. And maybe we interpreted it wrong, or maybe we had bad data in there. And so we came up with a bad result. And we want to test it live with real patients in real time after the build to continue to make necessary adjustments. So what questions do we want to ask? How does the design communicate our core message? This is really important. I can't tell you how often I come across a really pretty website and I can't tell what the provider does in the hero image when you first land on the page or the home page. I can't tell how that provider is different from other providers or what's special about them. You know, what I will always do is I will take our client's website and then I will take two primary competitors in that marketplace and compare their websites side by side. And we're going to look at, can we tell the websites apart? Can we tell why our client stands out from the other competitors? Can we tell what's different about our client, what their core differentiator or differentiators are? Is that visible and clear to users upon hitting the website versus the competitors in the marketplace? Like really, really important stuff. Your design should communicate that. It shouldn't just be pretty because they liked the color scheme or they thought the image was calming. You have to have a reason for the graphical representations as well as the content you're putting on the page. What blocks are chosen for display on the homepage and why? Again, this is going to give me a sense of, is this design firm worth its salt? Do they really know what they're talking about, or did they just randomly throw information on there? If you've done your due diligence and you've got some pre-data analysis built in, then they should have a clear reason for it. Well, we saw that users really were looking for this information consistently, so we put that information at the top of the homepage. Or we've seen consistently in other websites that we've built that the testimonial section should be in one of the top 3 blocks because that tends to get better results. And so that's why we put it up there. There has to be a rationale for the choices that they're making. If not, then they're just randomly designing things graphically so it looks pretty, but there's no actual user case for why they're doing it. And that's not the firm that you want to hire. Who will be coding the website? Will there be custom code? Again, there's complications with custom code. It can be good. It can cause complications. Just you should be aware of what kind of code they're using. We've come across a number of websites over the years where it's heavily custom coded. And so suddenly then you can't touch anything on the website because everything's interconnected to everything else through custom code. They don't have good notes in there. And so then things break when you try to make fixes, even simple fixes. So then you get stuck with a really janky website because you can't make changes to it. And then you end up having a big expense to just recode and rebuild the whole thing rather than making minor adjustments. So there are concerns around custom code you should be asking about. And then I always ask who will be coding the website. because you don't want them outsourcing to the Philippines or to India. It's not that you can't find good coders in those countries, you probably can, but why are they outsourcing to the Philippines or to India? It's because they're trying to get as much margin as they can out of the website build. And most likely, you're not hiring the best developer when you're doing that. So I want to see US based development teams. If they're working with a development team in another country, I want to definitely get a sense of who that team is and see other websites that they built and understand all of these questions that we're asking here. Do they understand the SEO? Do they understand conversion rate optimization? Are we doing any kind of data analysis, pre-build or post-build? Like, I really want to vet that team because it's just a red flag usually if they're trying to outsource abroad versus working with a really good US-based coder. What factors are we taking into account for site architecture? Again, what's the user journey? What are they looking for? How easy is it to reach important information from the homepage, from the main menu structure? How easy is it to reach relevant adjacent content from a blog article? All of this stuff is important that we should be thinking about in the design phase to make sure that we are getting the optimal usage from the site from a patient standpoint. How is the site designed to maximize conversions? Really important question. Again, why did you put that image there? Why are the blocks built the way that they are? How do you have the CTAs designed? Was there intentionality with that? Or was it just done because it looks nice? Or because the executive says that they like this color scheme and so the design firm put in that color scheme? There should be someone there that says, well, actually, we do not want the call to action button to be the same color as our brand colors because it's not going to attract the eye. It's not going to encourage inquiries. Someone has to be there that understands conversion rate optimization above and beyond just the website looking pretty. How do we ensure a strong SEO foundation or that we don't lose our existing SEO rankings? Super critical. I mean, again and again, we've had multiple clients, even really high-end clients that are making north of $250 million a year in revenue, will hire sometimes really expensive development firms for their websites, and they have no SEO background. And so suddenly they're dropping $250,000 on a website build, and the SEO tanks after the new website's launch. You don't want to be in that situation. The problem there is that nobody's going to know. If no one on your team has internal SEO expertise, if you're not working with an external SEO partner, then who's going to even notice the traffic drop? Unless you have your inquiries drop off a cliff, and even if inquiries drop off a cliff, people are probably going to think that something else is going on. Is the outreach team not doing their job? Are marketing campaigns not working? A lot of people don't default to thinking about a new website as being the reason for their inquiries suddenly dropping off of a cliff. So you've got to be really careful in terms of your agency that you hire to make sure that they understand SEO, or that you've partnered with an agency to monitor their work and double check that everything's been done right. What data are we looking for at the pre-build and why? And then obviously post-build as well. Again, it's all user journeys. What information is most important to them? So is this highlighted? Is it in a relevant place on these pages, usually at the top? Do we reiterate it at the bottom of the pages? How often are we using CTAs? We want CTAs to be attractive, to encourage people to inquire, but we also don't want to annoy or overwhelm users and visitors. So there's a lot of factors that go into conversion rate optimization. I'll talk about it more in a different slide here, where it's really important to get right. And then finally, the mobile piece. How does all of this translate to mobile? Oftentimes when we're working with an executive team and we do a new website build, we'll review that website build with the executive team before we launch it live. We always do this on desktop. And most of the time when executive teams or CMOs are reviewing the design agency work, they're looking at the desktop because the desktop gives us a big window. It gives us a lot of visual space to see what's going on. But the reality is that usually for a lot of healthcare services, anywhere from 60 to 80% of all patients and visitors from the web are coming through mobile. So you actually need to be looking at it on your phone because that's how your patients are going to be seeing your site. And the way that the elements and the blocks are represented on mobile is very, very different from the way that they appear on desktop. So just make sure you double check your mobile representations because that's often more important than how it looks on desktop. Okay, what's our strategy with SEO? Obviously, we need it to rank. It's not just about looking pretty. We need it to show up on Google. We need to show up high on Google in search engine results so that people can find the site, they can find us, they can inquire. It's not enough just for them to be able to find us. It has to convert. So once they find us, we want them to like the site, to be engaged, and then to drive an inquiry. So we need a conversion rate optimization on the site. Again, just simple things like a frozen header. Frozen header means that like the call number or the call to action button at the top of the menu will follow that user down on the screen as they scroll down. It'll do it on mobile, it'll do it on desktop, so that call button is always within easy reach, which is where we want it to be. We're trying to remove barriers for visitors so that we can encourage the inquiry. So SEO and conversion rate optimization are the two primary strategic components of any website. We want to think about a social media and a paid ad strategy. SEO is great. SEO is a very cost-effective way to get people to our website if you're doing it well. But we want to think about, let's say that we are a provider and we have our office on some dead-end street that nobody ever goes to. So this would be the equivalent of having really bad SEO. No one's ever finding us. Well, how are they going to find us if we're on a dead-end street? We have to market. We have to advertise. We have to put out campaigns on Facebook. We have to have boots on the ground outreach. We have to have LinkedIn campaigns, TV campaigns. We say, hey, we're that really great provider on the dead-end street you probably never go down. Why don't you come and check us out? Your social media and your pay ads are driving a lot of traffic to your website, or they should be. It should be a really important component, especially for newer providers or if you've got a new website. We don't want to be relying just on SEO. That's kind of like sitting on our hands waiting for people to find us. We want to actively encourage them to find the site, check out the new site. So there should be a social media and a paid ad strategy related to the new website build. Thinking about audiences is important in the build itself. Who are we trying to speak to? So are most of our visitors patients or families? Are a lot of our visitors community referral partners? Are insurance payers visiting the site when they're looking at contracting with us? Do we maybe have big contracts with insurance payers? And so maybe we want to have a bifurcation on the website where one journey takes them to patient information, another journey takes them to insurer information. Maybe we have separate service lines that we want to mention and kind of push people down, separate user journeys. Maybe we service adults and we service children, and those are separate user journeys. So we want to think about our audiences on the site, and then from an architecture standpoint, how do we design that visually, and then from a linking structure to make sure that we're putting people to the right pathways. Desired viewers or actions, what do we want them to do? Do we want them to chat with us online? Do we want them to fill out an online form? Do we want them to call us or to schedule an appointment? That is going to determine a lot of our design factors. It's going to determine our CTAs. It's going to determine how we think about our menu structure. Just a comment on chats here. Online chat is a really useful feature for a lot of healthcare providers. Just be aware that you have to man it. So the worst thing that you can do with an online chat feature is not having someone that's available 24/7 or that's available when the chat option is available. Most chat tools will have the ability to have it show up on the website or disappear at certain times. So you want someone available when the tool is showing. And this is important because why are people chatting with us? If I wanted to get an email, right? If I wanted to send a chat message and then have you email me back, I would have used a contact form. That's not what I want. If I wanted to talk to someone right now, I would have called. So you should have someone available to do the online chat who is going to answer those questions in chat. And the answering questions in chat should not be, hey, why don't you give me a call? There's a reason that person didn't call you. Otherwise, they would have called if that was their preferred method of contact. One of your values with online chat is the fact that it diverts a lot of mundane questions from your front desk or your call center. A lot of people ask, when are you open? When are you closing today? Hey, I forgot my hat. Can I schedule an appointment? All these really simple questions that can be answered in a chat, people will ask, and then that diverts them away from what we might call genuine patient inquiries, which is great. So now we're not tying up the phone lines or tying up our call center's time or our front desk person's time with little questions, and that can be answered in chat. So it's a great way to divert it. Now, just be aware that online chats don't lead to a lot of new patient inquiries. Sometimes they do, but more often than not, it's these mundane questions. So we should think about our chat functionality in that sense of, yes, it might help us generate a couple additional patient inquiries for people that prefer this contact method. But what it's really doing is providing great customer service, answering questions that's not tying up our phone lines. And then mobile first, mobile first, mobile first. Always be thinking about how are users seeing this on mobile? How are they using it on mobile? How are we running ad campaigns on mobile? Because that is where the majority of the users are accessing our site. So what KPIs are we looking at with websites? How do we evaluate that we have an effective website that is doing what we want it to do or what we paid someone to develop it to do? Total traffic, obviously, that's actually your SEO component, right? The better it's ranking online, the more traffic that you're going to get. So that's really an important primary metric for most websites. And of course, total inquiries. If we're getting a lot of traffic, we want it to convert. Is our traffic converting to qualified inquiries? Do we have good conversion rate optimization on the site? For a lot of our clients, when we take over a website, we find that no one's done any conversion rate optimization. So often within 1 to 2 months, we have doubled the homepage and the main service page conversion rates. So same amount of traffic, same marketing spend, but you're getting double the patient inquiry volume. There is a lot of value in conversion rate optimization. It's something that every single provider should be doing that they often don't think about because it's not something that we talk about often. It's not a service that a lot of marketing agencies provide, but conversion rate optimization has the potential to really deliver a lot of value for the same cost. It's just like training your sales team or your outreach team or training your call center. Can you get the current staff labor cost to improve its conversion rate? And so we don't have any attendant increase in labor costs, but now we're getting more bang for our buck. We're getting more conversions because we trained the team. Conversion rate optimization is the same for your website. When we're looking at conversions, we're looking at calls, we're looking at form fills, and we're looking at chats. Again, those are all going to have different conversion rates. The chats are usually the least likely to convert, but that's not the case for every provider. Every provider is a little bit different. We have seen providers who get lots of conversions off of Instagram chat, for example. It does happen. So you should be tracking all of those separately. And we don't just want to look at the total inquiries, but the visitor to inquiry conversion rate, particularly for the home page, for our service pages, for any page that's getting a lot of calls. As I mentioned, you can sometimes double the conversion rate of a single page. And so if you're getting 50 calls or inquiries from a page and you can get that to 100 without spending any additional money, that's huge for most healthcare providers. So definitely look at your pages, see which pages are getting the most calls. You can see that in your Google Analytics data most of the time if you've got it set up appropriately. And then you should be optimizing those pages for conversions. Where are you ranking, both locally in Google Maps, as well as your organic SERPs rankings? Again, if you're not familiar with those terms, use the SEO training and check that out. They'll do a very deep dive into SEO for you. Your local algorithm is different from your organic search algorithm. And so the way that we pop up in Maps needs to be optimized a little bit differently from an SEO standpoint. We want to check both. Where are we ranking in Maps? Where are we ranking in the SERP results? One final metric to think about or be aware of is time on page and bounce rate. So we can look at different pages and see, are people actually spending time on that page? Are they on it for 20 seconds? Are they on it for 5 minutes? That gives us a good sense if they're finding the information valuable, if the content is good. There's a lot of variability there. If someone's going to a contact us page, they're only going to be on that page for 20 seconds. Whereas if they're going to a really well-written blog article, they might be on the page for 5 minutes. Our homepage might have an average time on page of 1 minute and 30 seconds as they're checking out different services. So different metrics for different pages. Just be aware that time on page is a metric that you can get that gives you a sense of how valuable the content is. And then the bounce rate is how quickly they leave. So if they visit just that one page or if they visit 3 or 4 pages. That helps you understand if you got a good flow or a good structure, providing better information for patients. if they're finding the website engaging overall, so they're staying on it, they're trying to learn more. So your bounce rate can tell you if they're just visiting that one page or they're leaving right away a lot of the time. So website tactics, this is all going to be conversion rate optimization. Heat mapping and screen recording. If you go to the tracking tools training, I give you examples of those, but heat maps show what parts of the page people are clicking on the most. It can show you where people might be rage clicking, which means that they're clicking on an element that's not actually clickable. So that tells you that maybe you should make that element clickable or provide information around that element because they're not finding what they need. We can screen record. We can actually see what users are doing on the website, what pages they're visiting, how far down they're scrolling. So there's a lot of tactics around heat mapping to give you the data to make some of these decisions in terms of how you build your site architecture, how you do your menu nesting, how you do your blocks, and what part of the page that they're being put on, what content, what images you use. All this stuff can be analyzed through your heat mapping and screen recording software. We want intuitive menu structures. That's something that we should be conversion rate optimizing on a regular basis, testing what the title for a menu is, what information is in the menu, how are we nesting the menus, do we have secondary menus for relevant information for people. It also has a minor SEO impact, so we can actually sometimes rank better if we have certain key terms in the menu structure. Usually the farther away key term is or a main page is from the home page, it gets a little bit less of an SEO ranking sometimes, and so there's an SEO value there. So these are things that we can test to help both with rankings as well as on-page conversion rates. Connecting search intent to CTA is one I mentioned at the beginning. It's really important. If I'm landing on a page that is evaluating different dental implants, then that should not be a call to action page. I should have a call to action, or it should not have a call to action for a phone call. It should be a call to action that asks them to visit additional content on the website. Maybe they're coming to a page for addiction withdrawal. And so if I'm struggling with withdrawal from opioids, I'm looking for information. I'm not looking to call now. So a logical CTA would be say, why don't you look at our treatment page for opioid addiction, right? I went from withdrawal. Okay, this was helpful information on withdrawals. Let me look at treatment. Maybe that's something I should be checking out. Now on the treatment page, I'm going to have a CTA for call now. That makes sense. That's really good conversion rate optimization when you match the search intent to the CTAs on the page. We want CTAs that stand out. We want them to pop, as we often say. Your color for a CTA is often on the exact opposite of the color spectrum than your brand colors, and that's so it visually pops out and both consciously and unconsciously draws people attention. It will increase your conversions. Don't overwhelm visitors. You don't want it too cluttered. You don't want it too busy. You don't want too much information on there. You want to keep it clean for your pages. You want to keep your visual elements focused. These things are going to help your visitors find the content they need, get the information they want, and just feel comfortable on the page. You should be SEO optimizing every single page that you create. That's why you should partner with an agency or have an internal team that is focused on SEO optimization so that every page can rank. And then conversion rate optimize all your money pages. I mentioned this a little bit earlier. Look at your pages, look at where the calls are coming from. Any page that has a decent call volume, you should be spending time doing conversion rate optimization on it. Now, an important note here, and this was even surprising to me 10 years ago when we started doing conversion rate optimization for clients, is that there aren't a lot of best practices. Some of the best practices I mentioned that do apply to almost every site are frozen headers, click to call buttons, CTAs with the color that pops out from the background. Those can apply to basically any website. After that, everything's individual. Where are the blocks? What messaging are you using? What images are you using? Now, I thought when we first started doing this, we would be able to create a proprietary list of what worked for different providers and say, okay, the online review block is always the third block, and it focuses on the Google online reviews. And then we're going to have a testimonial right under that. And then we're going to have a visual representation of what the patient does here. Then we have a description under it. And we will just test these things and be able to tell clients, or at least know internally, what's going to work. That is absolutely not the case. Couldn't tell you why. There's just a different psychology, 2 different geographies, 2 different service types, 2 different providers. Not only that, the geography piece seems to matter a lot. So if we have the same client and we do a template website build, so let's say that they've got 50 locations and we've built 50 different websites. You would assume that if we make a change to one of those websites that has a positive effect on the conversion rate, we could then go and make that change to the other 49 websites and have the same positive effect. That's absolutely not the case. We've tested it again and again. So again, we'll have the same client with a templated website for all the different locations. And what we do to one site that has a positive effect can have a negative effect on the same exact website in a different area. So really good conversion rate optimization is actually highly individualized to that specific website. We'll try things with one site, and then on another site, we'll still try that to see if it works, but oftentimes it won't get the same result. It might even get a negative result. And so we have to try other components of moving things around, different images, different text, different messaging, different CTAs to find what works for that website in that geography. So just keep that in mind when you do conversion rate optimization. It actually has to be individualized for the websites based on the geography and the way that users behave in that area of the country. So that gets us into psychology for websites. What are people looking for? How do they feel on site? One thing that's really important and useful that is best practice is letting visitors know that they're in the right place. When they're coming off of ad campaigns, is there a continuity between the ad messaging, the ad imagery, and the page that they're landing on? Another thing that we want to look at for like home pages, when they're landing on a home page, does it clearly state what you do? You would be surprised how often when we take on new clients that the homepage just has their name or has some generic message like compassionate care. Compassionate care for what? Are you providing LASIK? Are you a dentist? Are you a drug rehab? Are you a surgeon? Like, what do you do with your compassionate care? So I don't know if I'm in the right place as a user. Maybe I think I landed in the wrong place. Maybe I'm just annoyed by the fact that I have to bum around and try and figure out if I'm in the right place. So from a psychological perspective, we always want to remove barriers, reduce friction, and make it as easy as people, or as easy for people as possible to get the information they need. So always in our hero image on a homepage, we're going to say exactly what you do. And then again, we want it to be differentiated. So if I compare our client's website to 2 competitors, can I tell immediately why I would choose our client versus the other 2 competitors? I should be able to do that. The differentiation should be clear through the messaging on the hero image. Representing your organization clearly. Who are you? How long have you been here? What is special about you? That all should be very clear through every component of your website. Even when you're doing blog content, how does that blog content speak to how you do things your way, what your differentiators are? Well, again, same thing. You don't want to be able to pull up your competitor's blog on the same topic and not be able to distinguish the two. There should be something unique in that content that speaks to who you are and how you do things. Desired information needs to be found quickly. That's done through your data analysis, your heat mapping, your site recording. But we want to understand what's important to users and then put that information in a prevalent location where it's very visible. Don't have confusing elements or long scrolls. One thing that I've come across several times with providers is they'll have like these map functionalities, and they're really annoying to scroll through. Like you try and scroll past it with your thumb and you get stuck on it, and suddenly it starts like zooming in and you can't get off the thing. Or it'll be really long. We've had examples where we had a client that had 50 locations and they put all 50 locations on their homepage. So on the desktop, you could get through that in 2 or 3 seconds, right? Because they had rows of 5. So you just scroll down real fast. But on mobile, everything gets shrunk, and so you can only show 1 location at a time. So you had to thumb scroll past 50 locations to get to the next element on the screen. Of course, nobody did it. When you heat mapped it, every single person dropped off and they had a 0% completion rate after the location scroll, because no one's going to scroll for 10 seconds past 50 locations. So just some of these simple elements you want to think of. That's why it goes back to being mobile first. Check your mobile first design. Make sure that the functionality makes sense for your patients and your visitors. Is it adding value, or is it just causing friction and annoyance? Visitors can see how you're different vis-a-vis competitors. As I talked about, your differentiation should be super clear on your homepage, in your blog content, and everything on your website. You should be able to say, oh yes, that represents us, and it helps us stand out versus competitors. We also want to pay attention to the little elements like unconscious attention. So I brought up the example of the color pop and how it draws your attention unconsciously, or you have an image of an eye and a person looking at an element that you want to draw attention to. Another example is a simple thing like periods. If you're doing a bullet point list, you generally don't want to have periods in that list because unconsciously we pause. We pause in our head when there's a period that breaks our flow from scrolling down the page. Very simple things, but very important from a design standpoint so that our users or visitors are staying on our page, engaging with our content, which increases the likelihood that they're going to inquire. So FAQs on the website, important questions to be asking. How often should we update to a new design? I get asked this a lot. The answer simply is probably every 5 years. Is that a hard and fast rule? No, but just like you're going to get new furniture or repaint your building from time to time or just do standard maintenance, you should be thinking about your website the same way. You do not want a situation where visitors come to your website and they say, oh, was this built in 1999 by some college kid? This looks terrible. That's a bad reflection of you. You're spending all this money on SEO. You're spending all this money on marketing to drive people to the website, and then they land on a dump. You don't want that to be the case. So on average, just budget for every 5 years. What should a website cost? Highly variable here. It depends on if you're paying and investing in a good design, or you're just saying, hey, I want you to copy this other provider website and do something similar. Are you paying for pre-build data analysis and post-build data analysis? Are you paying for custom code? All of these are going to have an impact on your website design. The bottom line is if you want a decent without now in 2025, $15,000 is going to get you a decent website. And that's without a data analysis pre or post. That is just for design and build. That's a really basic cost. There aren't a lot of margins on that from the agency side. Actually, the agency will not make much money on a $15,000 design because there is such a high intensive labor cost and a MarTech cost for those builds. But that's going to get you a decent 8 to 12 page standard rebuild. Now, related to that is, what do we build it on? Are we building it on Wix or Squarespace or WordPress or Drupal? So just be aware, Wix and Squarespace used to be pretty terrible. You couldn't do a lot of custom optimizations on them. You couldn't do a lot of SEO optimization. So they were pretty poor website tools to use. They were the preference of college kids that really didn't know how to build a website but wanted to charge for it. Nowadays, Wix and Squarespace are getting a lot better, but they're still not preferred compared to WordPress, which is used for like 60% of all websites worldwide. It allows for better coding options. It has a huge community to use for plugins for different various functionality that are low cost. You can do really extensive SEO optimizations that you can't do as well on Wix and Squarespace. So for most providers, most healthcare providers in general, they're going to use a WordPress build. Now you also have Drupal. Drupal is for really advanced coding, especially if you have thousands of web pages like a hospital site might. If that includes patient portal logins, payment portal logins, insurance profile logins, anything that gets into really high level complexity, it's usually going to be best to build through Drupal. And you can also do a lot of sophisticated tools through Drupal. So for example, we can identify based on the search if a person is a man or a woman, or if they came from a different page that was related to women's healthcare services. Drupal can identify that, and then we can actually have dynamic content and change out the heading or change out an image that shows on the next site that shows the image of a woman, versus if it was a search for men's healthcare or they came from another site or another page on the site that was men's health, then we would show an image of a man. So those things can be done with Drupal in a really sophisticated manner that you're not going to be able to do with some of the other design tools. So now with that said, Drupal's super expensive. You have to have a full-time developer on staff to be able to manage that. When you're getting into website builds with that level of complexity, you're talking about anywhere from 1 million to 10 million for a single website build. So you're talking about really, really advanced content at that stage. That's why I said the vast majority of healthcare providers are probably going to build with WordPress, and I would recommend they build with WordPress. Then if you're getting to really sophisticated, lots of portals, thousands of pages, really dynamic content that you're willing to pay someone to constantly manage, like a lot of bigger hospital or healthcare systems, then I'm going to recommend Drupal. Do we need a full-time developer? If you're using Drupal, yes, 100%, you need a full-time developer. You should just have someone on staff. In addition, even to an outsourced agency, like the full-time staff person might need to lean on the agency from time to time, but you should have someone full-time that's managing that owns all the content, that owns all the web work. For most other providers, no. You're not going to need regular updates to the website. Let's say you're doing some text updates, maybe you're doing staff page updates. Those are only happening now and then. So you should have someone that you're just contracting with, or that you have an agency that you're partnering with, but you definitely don't need a full-time web developer for most of that work. Are our web forms HIPAA compliant? Check out the legal and ethical compliance training for a full overview of that. But you do want web forms to be HIPAA compliant. You need double-end encryption on those. You should have your CTO or CIO be familiar with it, or at least your design agency knows how to build HIPAA compliant forms on your website. And then can we install tracking? So again, I covered this in the legal and ethical compliance training. So go there for an in-depth answer to this. Yes, you can install tracking for the most part. There is a lot of variability in terms of how you use it for advertising versus if you're just using it for like Google Analytics tracking data. There are ways you can be HIPAA compliant with your data tracking tools. It does depend on if you have a login portal on the site, which would consider to be an authorized and unauthorized website according to the FTC. So you have to have some concerns around that. Again, I'd recommend the legal and ethical compliance training for a full review. It is possible, but there is some nuance there. Preventing hacks, your website code needs to be updated constantly. Hackers are always finding new ways in. And so you'll often see that there's security updates or web plugin updates that are available in the back end of like a WordPress design. Be careful with those. You need to be updating those on a consistent basis. You need to be updating to the latest code bases on a consistent basis. But there is a lot of risk there with things breaking. If we update the new code and maybe one of the new plugins hasn't been updated to that yet, then it's going to potentially break the entire site. This is not uncommon when we're doing security plugin updates. And so we always make sure that the team is doing these later in the day and that they are on top of checking it immediately after, because we might have to go in and completely fix some code that didn't jive with the new update. And so you don't want to be doing that with the intern that you told to manage the pictures on your site, because it can absolutely break it. The site will go down. Then you're going to need a coder, on very short notice to go in and fix it, which is going to be really expensive. So you want to make sure your security is updated all the time. You want to make sure you're working with a web development firm that understands basic security. If you get into more complex healthcare, if you have like medical records access online, then you definitely want to have a firm that really understands complex security needs and anti-hacking measures. If you're just having a standard website where you're not hosting any patient information, you don't want people hacking your site because it'll break it. But as long as they're not getting into patient records or financial details, it's not as large of a liability. So I would always say if you've got any kind of financial or patient records that are accessible from your website, 100% make sure you're working with a really experienced firm from a cybersecurity standpoint. If you don't have that information on your website, then you don't need to necessarily contract with a cybersecurity provider or an agency that has deep expertise in that. But again, from a liability standpoint, there's always pros and cons to the cost risk conversation there. So lots to think about when it comes to a website. I mean, the main point I want you to walk away from this training is it's not just design. Think about your search engine optimization, think about your conversion rate optimization, make sure you're using data-informed decisions as you're coming up with what you want your new website build to be. And make sure you're asking the right questions of potential agency partners to ensure that they understand all of these different aspects, because we don't just want a pretty website. We want a website that looks good, ranks, and converts.